September 15, 1937. Dear Marg. 11 o'clock in the morning. I suppose you were sitting at the office and wishing you were outside while here am I in the tent and glad to be here. I started out early this morning to follow a dike on the northern claims when the rain started. I am just beginning to thaw out now, and believe you me, the sun must shine before I leave this tent again today. We went on quite a party Saturday night. It sure was fun. 5 boys and 8 girls from the nearby mines. We started home about 4 in the morning by boat, intending to make the rounds to each camp. But at each port the travelers refused to vacate, so the old captain, quite a character, just kept making the circle until 7. We all had lunch or breakfast at the Martin Bud mine. Then bad news slapped us in the face. What a whack! The geologist at the mine told us he had had slides made of certain rocks and found we were calling them by a different name. The whole camp must change its maps. So here we are redrawing our map, and here is another wet day to help things along. Everything happens to us. Oh well, it gives a recess and time to do a little cooking. We have biscuits, rice pudding and macaroni in the oven and a stew on the boil, so we won't be hungry. I received a letter from my brother Gilbert. He clerks at a mine about 20 miles from here. He said Art Bowyer, Dad's first cousin, and Bill Hancock are both working with him, arriving a few days ago. I am glad to hear Bill is north. I believe he has a touch of the consumption, also known as tuberculosis. This life will either knock it out of him or knock him out. A letter from home brought a snap of Gil, Joyce and I, not a good one, but enclosing it anyways. The camps have a great laugh on me. The other morning, I looked out of the tent to see a squirrel in the cook tent sampling the beans. I grabbed the revolver and shot him, and the back of the cook tent went all red. I called to Jim to look at the blood. Woe is me, I had shot the ketchup bottle, so everyone greets me with "How's the blood, Bidge?" Bidge was my nickname from my youth. The old captain who drives us around is an old saltwater captain, a Swede named Carey. He is some man, although he has lived at Larder Lake for almost 15 years piloting an old pointer. He has sailed the 7 seas and doesn't know the number of times he has crossed the Atlantic. Drunkenness caused the cancellation of his papers on the ocean. It's too bad, but he seems quite happy. Well, Margie will be wondering just what has happened to me, not writing, and here I am without an excuse, so beg forgiveness. Thanks for the clippings, dear. I got a more recent paper on the boat racing, but the write-up of the first heat were short and just a summary of the last, so your clippings filled in fine. Thanks too for the one of the Bracebridge lad. I do not know the boy, but know his folks to speak to. It would be pretty hard losing a lad like that. I do know Johnson, he's some guy. Also, the driver of the ambulance, so you see it was interesting news to me. Jim has just finished his end of the map, so now, it's my turn, so we'll close now, dear, hoping to hear from you soon. As ever. Roger. September 22, 1937, Larder Lake, PO. Dear Marg. Thanks, dear, for the letter received Monday. I am still in the same place and will be for another week. We made a small discovery last Saturday, but though little of it, and was all prepared to send in our map when the assay returns came. So, we wired Toronto and they sent up a man. We have 2 men trenching and expect to start a little blasting in a couple of days. I'm certainly glad we didn't overlook the spot, as it would have looked bad had someone else found it later. The spirits are high in the office, so we are lifted one more peg on the ladder. I received a letter from home giving me all the dope on the epidemic and weather. Apparently both are bad. We have had our share of bad weather here, although the last 3 days have been perfect. The leaves are changing fast and are really beautiful. I don't use that word often. The undergrowth is scarlet and burnt orange, while the larger trees fade from their natural green to a pale yellow that seems almost transparent. No, my dear, I am not using dog teams and won't be if I can help it. I have used them a few times in my life. Although I like dogs as a rule, huskies and sleigh dogs aren't the same. They are generally vicious and one must keep them that way or they become lazy. You see, dogs are very similar to men. If you have one dog or man, you can befriend him and favor him and gain a real pal. On the other hand, if you have a gang and become too friendly and easy, they ride you. Take the average laborer and make him sore, he will either quit or take his fury out on the pick and shovel. A husky is the same. It ends up that they either respect you and will do as they are told or will try to get even. This doesn't sound logical, but it's the truth. A foreman after a number of years can gather a gang around him that respect and later show affection in a rough way. Well, Marg, the harvest moon is just breaking over Mount Camanus. This mountain is often called the Borderloof. It's on the borderline of Quebec and Ontario and is shaped like a beehive. The moon, when full, especially the September moon, makes one feel peculiar. Maybe a touch of loneliness, eh? Jim and I are planning a trip to BC to a valley that was found by Jack Hamill, or I should say, sighted as he found it, or saw it from a plane. It is supposed to be further advanced in growth than any part of Canada. The belief is that hot springs hasten the growth. Of course, this is just a plan, but we are getting what data we can on it and figuring the cost overall. If the winter is good to us, we will have sufficient cash to try at least. I have always wanted to do something different to others, and if I don't start soon it will be too late. However, time will tell. Well, my dear, it sure is going to be cold tonight. The wind is dropping and I expect there will be more frost. Right now, the tent feels like an oven as it's bake night, but Jim is the baker. Yes, my biscuits were a success as dough gods are concerned. The pies were also eatable. I don't think you would relish one though unless you were in camp. They always take back that certain home touch. That's about all for now, Marg, and I would like another Cedar Wild special. I wish one would be delivered personally. An X is a very poor imitation of your kisses, but I suppose I must wait until I see you, then maybe you will give me one, or more? Well, we'll say goodbye for now. As always. Roger. September 29, 37. Dear Marg. Here it is nearly the end of the month and still in the same place, but not the least bit sorry I haven't been moved. Our workings are looking better each day, the trenching on one section finished and most of the blasting. I have to load and light them myself. It made me a little nervous the first day, and was accused of having nightmares that night. That's all over now and I'm quite a powder monkey. We split the gang, each taking 2 men. I have one good fellow with me, a Greek and well educated. Why he is in this country striking steel for a living I don't know yet. Of course, we imagine a lot of things, but he is pretty quiet and tells me little of his country. I believe he's about 40 but looks older. The other is just the average hunky, hardworking when you're around and dumb. There was another dance in town last week but didn't stay. They had an old-time orchestra and that means a pretty tough crowd. They sure like to throw everything open on pay night. We intended working with the men Sunday but had a chance to go into the township east, just inside the Quebec border. We walked out to the highway with the government geologist, Dr. Jerry, who was trying to determine a certain formation. Through him we learned a good deal that will help us on our own property. That is one thing in this country, an unwritten law more or less, to be friendly and try to help and encourage. The doctor told us a story which explains the northern character. A stranger passing a camp near mealtime is always asked to dinner. A certain man who has lived in town for a number of years carried the same custom to France during the war. He was in the foresters engaged in hewing timber in the woods when King George came to inspect the camp. At mealtime the men were helping themselves from the lunch cart when the larder lake man called to the king, "Have you eaten yet?" The king answered no, so the soldier dishes a plate for the king and takes it to a stump, inviting the king to dine with him. According to the doctor, the king really enjoyed that meal with the easy-going fellow. I am going to try and meet this fellow if I possibly can, just to see what he is like in manner. Well, Marg, this is a bunch of hooey and you will probably be bored stiff by now. However, my dear, there is little that happens around here except concerning mines. I wish I could really describe the coloring of the bush, although the leaves are falling fast. I have not received a letter since I last wrote. The reason, I suppose, is no one has called for mail this week. But if I don't send one to you now, you might wait some time for a reply. That's twisting things around, eh? I am looking forward to a real X in your next letter, although, as I said before, they are a poor imitation of the good old Cedar Wild ones. Of course, they can be repeated when I see you again, yes? You could feel embarrassed if I called at the office and asked for you. When you appeared, gave you a real kiss, ignoring spectators and everything except you. Right now, I believe I would. It's getting late again, Marg, 11 o'clock, so we'll turn in. Excuse the scratch as I am writing this on a box which cramps me for room. However, the intentions are of the best. As ever. Roger.